So you're all very welcome to today's Tableau user group Ireland. This is the first Tableau user group of 2022. So a happy new year to everybody, even though it is the 19th. That might well be your last happy new year of 2022, but I hope it's going well for you so far. And that you're enjoying it, and that the weather is good, and that wherever you are in the world, you're not being affected too much by will I mention it, the Omicron coronavirus or whatever it is, which hopefully might be, fingers crossed, might be going away, which may or may not allow us to host a live face-to-face event in the future. But we'll get this one out of the way first, and then we can talk about that. There are a good few people signed up to join us today. So far, we've got 16 people in attendance. So we'll give everybody a few more minutes, if that's okay, just before we get started. We'll probably kick off at about 6 minutes past 11. So if you're talking to any of your colleagues and they're delayed, tell them, get on in here, and we're ready and waiting to go. We have two great panelists for you today, as always. Both of them based in Ireland. Kicking us off today will be Johns George from Bank of Ireland. I've spoken to Johns on several occasions in the past, met him at a couple of face-to-face TUGs with Jamie Rennan and his colleagues from Bank of Ireland. And we always have a bit of fun, and they always are great for lining up for photographs and all that kind of thing. And they do fantastic work in Bank of Ireland. You'll have seen their work all over the media, RTE, Irish Times, I think, have used you as well, and all sorts of people. So they're doing fascinating stuff inside in their team, analytics team there in Bank of Ireland. And we're delighted to have Johns today. When I was talking to him last week, we do these blogs, as you've probably seen, because we've posted it on our Information Lab Ireland LinkedIn channel. And it's just a way of sort of letting people know who are attending the Tableau user groups, you know, what the speakers, who the speakers are, what they're like, and where they're from. And John's story is fascinating, absolutely fascinating. And you know, having come from India at the age of 13 and moved to Ireland, and lived in Carrickmacross in Monaghan, of all places, which I found was fascinating. You can find out more about that in the blog if you have a look at it. And then eventually moving down to Dublin, and has been here for a good few years, and is in Bank of Ireland. So Johns is going to take us on a journey looking at electric vehicles. I think really isn't that what the focus is going to be of your talk today, Johns?
Yeah, mostly the electric vehicles and the future, what holds for that.
Yeah, great. Okay, so we look forward to that, and he's going to kick us off. We'll probably have one or two questions then after that, if people have them. And by the way, on that, if you are posting questions, do try and post them in the Q&A at the bottom. And basically what I'll do is I'll feed them to Johns and Nanette after the session, if that's okay, and absolutely fine. And anything else, then you can put it into the chat, absolutely no problem. Okay, and so after we hear from Johns, we'll be talking to another person who has made her home here, is Nanette Solan, who works for Petrol, has been with Petrol for 3 years. And again, when we were doing our quick chat for the blog, we got into a sort of a fascinating discussion about how she, from the Netherlands, ended up in Ireland, and it started off in NUIG, didn't you? You did Erasmus in Galway, yeah, and then moved to Italy. And I don't think I've ever heard this before, but you missed Ireland so much you decided to come back here from Italy, which I think is a first. But then again, I kind of did the same myself. So there you are. And so we had a great chat about that. And Nanette, I'm looking forward to hearing what you're going to be talking about after John's. And you're going to be looking at something that is, of course, again, because we're looking at a future for cars in this particular Tableau user group, something that's connected to it, but different.
Yeah, I'm going to kind of step back 2 years to the start of COVID, and show you how we looked into the future, tried to look into the future 2 years ago to see how we would get through the pandemic as a travel company ultimately. Yeah,
and we had a tech check there. We've been here since about 10:30, and we had a tech check there, and we were looking through some of the slides and some of the, like, Nanette's story and the story of the company there, and I think it's a story that a lot of companies had, really, and it's fascinating, and like if any of you know anything about skiing and some of the slopes that people have to go on, you haven't seen anything like the slopes on the charts that Nanette is going to present to us. So it's fascinating stuff. So look, I've rambled on for far too long. We have a good few people in now. So if anybody has anything that any questions during the event, as I said, put them into the Q&A. If there's anything else that you want to raise, put them into the chat as well. And I think without further ado, we will get started. So I'll ask everybody to go on mute besides John's George, and I'll certainly go on mute. And John's, I'll hand it over to you. If that's okay. Take it away.
Perfect. Thanks, Johnny. I will just present my screen. Just bear with me a second. Yeah.
That's perfect, Johns. I can see that there. That's your car just parked outside your outside your house. Lovely. Okay, I'll leave you.
I really wish that was the case, John.
Okay, talk to you after. Good man, Johns.
All right, talk to you soon. So today I'm going to talk about the sustainable future for the Irish motor industry. As you might know, everybody is moving into EV market and hopefully trying to save the world with the from the climate catastrophe that trying to avoid with the reduced and trying to reduce the temperature rising in the world. So let's talk about the EV market now. So in an overview, Ireland's national policy position has been to reduce the CO2 emission by 2050 by 80% compared to the 1990 levels. That's not just the EV, but also by the land usage, the agricultural industry, and other industries as well. So in last year, the government published a very ambitious report saying by 2025, they want to have around 180,000 EVs in the market in the country, and almost 1 million by 2030. I personally saying, I think that's a bit too much a stretch. Currently, there are less than 50,000 EVs in the country, and even if everybody start buying EVs, I think it's still a doubtful case there will be almost 1 million EVs by the end of this decade. That's just my point of view, but that was the government published report. That's their ambition, and even the EU regulations. EU was saying from 20 to 2024, all the vehicles being sold in EU should be of a 95-gram carbon emission per kilometers. So to compare it, around in 2020, I think the CO2 average emissions in Ireland for new cars sold was around 105 or 110. It was still above the limits. So what happens if that's the case is whenever a new car is sold, and if it's above the 95 grams, so that company has to pay a penalty. Here you can see the penalty is 95 per gram in the kilometers range. So it's not like the companies will just pay the fine and be the end of it. So eventually the higher price is going to come down to the customers. So for an example, I would say last year in 2021, a hatchback of Mercedes A-Class had a carbon emission level of average of 119, 120. So that is still way above the 95 grams. So when the companies are going to pay the penalty, they will jack up the prices. And I was talking to one of the dealerships a couple of weeks back, and they were saying just last couple of months, on average, there has been an increase of 3,000 euros for all the vehicles, not just the EVs. So all the vehicles are going to increase the price if that's the case. So that's for the 2020 to 2024, the 95 grams. But in 2025, they want to reduce further by 15%. And by 2030 onwards, they want to reduce by 37.5. And I think there is a proposal in EU Parliament or Commission saying they want to, by 2030, they don't want to limit by 37%. They want to increase by 50%. I mean, they want to reduce it by 50%. So there's still, going to be, further these ambitions going forward. And also last year, on average, the Ireland's CO2 EV, sorry, not just EV, the all market was 94 gram per kilometers. So that's still good, but only for certain companies. Like if you take Toyota, for example, their new vehicle carbon emissions will be really low because almost all the vehicles have somewhat at least hybrid. They have limited plug-in hybrids, but the normal hybrid vehicles will be their case, but there will be far less below 95 grams. But if you take a Mercedes, for example, or like Audi or some other brands, it'll be slightly above 95 grams. So this is still a penalty case that can come down to customers. At the first, it'll go to the brand and then eventually to customers. So we are the one who have to pay the fine. So now let's take a look into what the Irish market was last year. So if you look at here, the total sales of 2021 in Ireland has been 104,000. And out of that, diesel still is the majority sales, is around 35,000. And then comes the petrol with 33,000 and hybrid 27,000 and electric still far below that is 8,000. So when you say petrol and diesel is 65%, it's still very high. Even the government subsidies and everything, people are a bit more reluctant to go into that, sustainability agenda because of the lower range the EV vehicles and hybrid might be having, and the very high price. Also in the hybrid space as well, the 25% that's combined the hybrid and plug-in hybrid, that's still relatively somewhat less compared to other markets. So and recently big brands has been saying we are no longer going to invest in hybrid or plug-in hybrid, the matter of fact. So they're saying in their point of view the future is EV. So there's no much point of just investing in hybrid and plug-in hybrids. So they're going to offer the existing vehicles, but that's the end of it. So there could be a mindset in people like, what's the point of me buying a hybrid or plug-in hybrid if there's no much retail value at the end of the 3-year or 5-year the loan process. So that's still there, and the EV market is still below 10%. And if you look at here, sorry, you can see the Toyota and Volkswagen is the highest as always. So Toyota and Volkswagen has been rivals for long. They compete for the first position in not just Ireland or all over the world. And then comes the Hyundai, Skoda. And one of the fascinating things you can see is Tesla being here with 792 vehicles, where a couple of years back, Tesla would not be anywhere in the chart at all in Ireland or anywhere in the world. Now they are coming in the chart in at least in the Ireland, in the middle position, even above the Honda or Mini or Lexus. And just a second. And also, Toyota being one of the highest selling brand in Ireland, and also the biggest, selling brand in all over the world. They still don't have even one EV car portfolio. That being said, they are one of the first companies to release the hybrid cars in late 90s or early 2000s, the Prius. But they had a head start. But I think I'm being a little judgmental here, saying the EV ambitions or hybrid ambition has not been very good. The similar to Nissan with they were one of the first to market with the Nissan Leaf, but they still have not had many other vehicles other than Leaf since then. So they're still falling behind, whereas in their rival Volkswagen has been offering multiple vehicles. In Volkswagen, you can see the ID3, ID4 in electric range, and ID4 has been topped the European market in April 2021 as the most selling EVs in EU. But that's not just Volkswagen and the other companies, sister companies in Volkswagen, like Audi start selling the Q4 e-trons, and I think the Porsche start selling the Taycan and all those kind of vehicles is there. But Toyota still has not even released one. I think they're going to release one SUV, the EV SUV, at the end of this year. but that's still doubtful because of the supply chain issues and the chip shortage. Now, as you can see here, in 2017, the Ireland EV market has been with only 622 vehicles, and it has, going up ever since. But in 2018, there has been almost 100% increase with 1,233 vehicles, and in 2019, there's been a 3,444 vehicles, and by 2020, even with the COVID, they still kept on increasing with 4,000. And last year, there's been a almost 113% increase with 8,000. And in Ireland, the biggest age group that buys EV is 40 to 50-year-old. As you can imagine, 40 to 50-year-old might be earning the most amount of money in their career, so that could be the reason. But also, people under the age of 30 only comes only under 5% when it comes to EV market. The reason being, the millennials and Generation Z, it's not very affordable for them to buy into the EV dreams. If you look at the right side, there's top selling EVs like Volkswagen ID4 with 31K, Kia Niro is 36K, and Tesla Model 3 with 51, and or Audi Q4 with 47. These are still very high price. That's really starting price. If you start adding in very basic couple of other things, the price will go up more than 40,000 easily, even for the ID4. So being very ambitious in the future and everything, and saying the price is still very high, that limits the customers going to go into that market. So under the age of 30, the millennials and Generation Z, I would say, is most ambitious into getting into that sustainability goals. They want to be clean, they want to have the green dreams and everything, but still the prices remain high for them to afford EV vehicles. Also, 67% of the EV customers are male. So maybe the brands need to be a bit more aware of this, and go into, when they're messaging advertisements for these EV vehicles, they need to be a bit more aware of their about the all the genders, and reach out to the female customers, and because it's still far less than 40%. Now, here, what are the incentives the Irish government provides for the? There's almost 50%. Sorry, I mean, up to 5,000 euros provided for purchasing a new EV vehicle, and before there was no cap. In 2021, in the 2022 budget, there was a cap of 60,000 applied to the EV vehicles. And also there was a sad thing about government pulling out the grant for plug-in vehicles as well. So that was a sad part. The industry was calling out in the opposite way, giving more grant, and also to extend the grant to the plug-in hybrid as well. But government had other plans. And also there was a 600 euro installation for the home charger. That's an attractive offer, and the 0% benefit in kind rate up to 50,000. So that's a very attractive thing for the business customers, where they can benefit from the 0% the benefit in kind. And also, it's a EV vehicles come under the lowest in the tax rate with only 120 euros. And if you use the motorway or things like that, there's a toll deduction of 50% for electric vehicles and 25% for plug-in. So that's in plug-in range, the hybrid, that's the only benefit I personally see in terms of the subsidies. And also there's a VAT relief for 5,000 euros for the BEVs. And if you look here, this is the total car sales in Ireland the past couple of years, starting from 2017. As you can imagine, from 2017, the car sales has been going down bit by bit. And there's a big dip in 2020 because that's because of the COVID, and there was, no one literally was going out anymore. So, and even though it is increasing in 2021, but that's still comparatively less than 2019. So it's not literally increasing. It's still a less amount of cars sold compared to 2019. But at the same time, the EV vehicles market has been going up ever since 2017. As you've seen the last chart, there's been 100%, almost 100% increase year by year, except 2020 because of the COVID. So there's still, definitely there is a market for it, but I personally think there's more the government can do because of the higher price of the EV, and also the higher price and the lack of the charging points in all around the country. Even though there are places, but you have to wait a long time. If it's not a fast charger you're plugging into, you have to wait like maybe 2 or 3 hours to get it to full charge at least. So those are the things government needs to provide to increase the car sales to the EV market. So now let's look into the utopia of the EV market, that is Norway. So as you might have heard, like Norway sells the most amount of EVs in the world. So why is that? So even when there was a very less amount of choices in EV vehicles, that is even before 2018, they've been doing pretty good. Almost 30% of the car sales has been EVs, and by 2020, about 50% of the car sales have been the EVs. And as of last year, I think they have crossed more than 65%. And if you combine the plug-in hybrids and hybrids as well, the Norway comes around 80 or 85%. So that's far above any other country has been doing. So why has been this case? So very early on, Norway has been offering very good incentives. So their incentives is completely different from what Ireland or UK is offering. Ireland and UK offers most amount of grant, 5,000 euro, up to 5,000 euro grant. But Norway don't provide that grant. Instead of that, they provide other subsidies like no purchase or import taxes, or exemption from 25% of the VAT. There's no annual road tax, but that only until 2021, and no charge for tolls or ferries. That's pretty good in my opinion. And maximum of 50% of the total amount of ferry fares, and maximum of 50% of the total amount of toll roads, and free municipal parking. That's only till 2017. That's something very interesting to me. Whenever 30% of the market share is EVs, and all of the EVs in parking for free in the city center. That's quite interesting. And also the parking fees for EVs has been introduced locally with an upper limit to maximum 50% since 2018. Since they stopped the free parking as of 2017. And another interesting thing is they have access to the best lanes, the EV cars. So that's pretty good. In peak hours, you're able to use the best lanes and get to the, get to work as soon as possible, rather than sitting in 1 or 2 hours in the traffic. So that's also interesting. So these are only some of the incentives that I found really interesting. There are also other incentives as well they were providing. So in my personal opinion, these are the kind of incentives the government should be providing, rather than the 5,000 euros, because just by giving the 5,000 euros, they are not actually reducing the car prices that much. So if you compare a couple of cars, like even the Audi Q4, the e-tron, if you compare the price in here in Ireland versus the Norway's price, is almost similar or even less in Norway. So so I don't really see just by giving grant the companies are going to reduce the price. So they're just naturally going to jack up the prices, saying there's more import tax, or there's more need of investment and things like that. Naturally they're going to they won't reduce the price by 5,000. And so I personally see this as a way to go forward, but I hope to see at least in the 2032 budget, there will be more subsidies, not just by grant, other things like reduced parking fees, or reduced toll fees, or access to best lanes, as a matter of fact. Now, in terms of the future Irish car sales, as of last year, almost all the companies has been providing at least one car in EV segment. So that gives customers a lot more choices, and that will increase the competition as well. So they will give more attractive offers, and rather than asking customers to add in each options in the when they're buying a car, probably giving built-in offers saying, okay, almost everything is included in the package, so you need to pay only a couple of maybe 1,000 or 2,000 euros to include those. So those kind of competition is going to come in from this year, and EV prices still remain very high. That affect the willingness to buy into the sustainable agenda. So I think the finance institutions will be coming in with new products in this green vehicle segment soon, and they will be providing much better interest rate. Just like the green mortgage we have, so I'm hoping there will be like a green EV loan with a very less interest rate. So, and because of the semiconductor shortage, you might have heard of, and supply chain issues, the customer has to wait a very long time. That's in terms of, I was like I was saying, I was talking to the dealers a couple of weeks back, and they were saying if I place an order in now, I have to wait till August to get that model. That's that much delay. Before COVID, it used to be like a 1 to 2 month max, but now it's 6 or 7 months. So that's still there, and the range anxiety of the electric vehicles is still very real. So when they say 100, 420 kilometers range when fully charged, or 400 or 500 kilometers, that's still a very doubtful scenario you're going to get that much. So when they say WLTP range, that's a world one of the standards they look into. So when they look at when they try to get this 425 kilometer range in WLTP, maybe they're driving in 14 or 15 degrees climate, but in Ireland, in the winter time, it goes down less than 10 degrees. So naturally the range will be affected. So me and my brother, actually a couple of weeks back, was driving a Tesla. We rented a Tesla and planned on going to Kilkenny, and from my place to Kilkenny, there's only 130 or 140 kilometers. So when we picked up the Tesla, there was around 280 kilometer range left. But when we went on to the motorway and we went 120 kilometers, kilometer per hour, the range of that 280 be coming down very, very fast. So we barely made it to one of the superchargers. When we made it, that's the first time I actually felt the range anxiety. Oh, what will happen if I the range goes down in the middle of the motorway? What will I do then? So when I went to the Tesla supercharger, there was only literally 2 kilometers left. Actually, I have the proof to show that. See, that is a 2 kilometer left when I reached the superchargers. And to get to that 2 kilometers remaining, I had to drive in 70 kilometers per hour in the motorway. So I was one of those idiots you see in YouTube, driving very cool cars like Lamborghini or Ferrari, and didn't know how to drive it. So I was one of those guys driving 70 or 60 kilometers per hour in a motorway. So the range anxiety is real, and the companies has been investing very large amount of money in inventing the solid batteries and stuff like that. But still, that is one of the reasons people are still reluctant to buy EV vehicles. 425 might not be a realistic range that a company, the car might be offering. So it could be, if it's 425, they could be realistically getting a max of 300 or 325. So that's one of the drawbacks I see, which will be, I think last week or the week before, the Mercedes came up with a car, I think EQXX. I think it was a concept model, but the range they were claiming for that was 1,000 kilometers. So those are more ideal, I would say. 1,000 kilometers, and even if it's 1,000 kilometers not realistic, you might get 600 or 700 kilometers. So those are the kind of things that will be coming in the near future, 2023 or 2024. So the more competition, the lesser the price, and also a better technology coming in as well. And personally saying, I think government need to provide more support. You can't increase the EV sales and plan on selling million cars by 2030 without the government support. So government support not only need to be in the grant level, so also in something similar to the Norway model going forward. Yeah, so that's it for my presentation and the sustainable future for the Irish motor industry. So if you have any questions, happy to answer it now or wait till the end.
Johns, I love that. I think it was absolutely fantastic. And Paddy Kavanagh, who's a regular at these, has popped into the chat there and says we bought a Nissan Leaf in March last year, and I really enjoy seeing data on this topic. And I wholeheartedly agree with him on that. I actually I had a question myself as you were talking there, and there was one part of it where you're saying that the sales were 40-year-olds to 50-year-olds, right? And 67% of them were male. Are you aware? I'm sure that the brands have done studies on this and that kind of thing. But are you aware of any sort of questionnaires, or is it qualitative, surveys or studies that have been done by companies to find out the type of people who are buying these cars? Because it strikes me that, from a marketing point of view, there's 67% male, and you're not selling a safe, clean car to, the other 50% of the population. Do you know what I mean?
I don't think they have looked into the gender point of view in the vehicles, but they might be looking into the, the age group, the 40 to 50-year-old, and the most ambitious people, I feel like the most ambitious are under 30-year-old when going to the EV market, but they're still not able to afford. They might be having a job, they might be having a decent salary, but for more than 40,000 euros for a car, that's with a very basic car, is 40,000 still remain very high. So like you might heard, a lot of companies are trying to bring out cars with lower price, but still the investment needed for this complete overchange of this from the ICE cars to EV market is very substantial. So they won't be able to do that overnight, but still, I think that's where the government should come in and offer more support. Something similar to the Norway model, but it's the irony is there, the Norway been offering this kind of large amount of financial support through their oil wells.
They do a lot in that space. Like, I mean, they buy forests for countries in Africa and that kind of thing. So, I suppose it's one way of dealing with your oil income. On that point of Norway, right? Porrick has chipped in with a question here. He's you may or may not know this, by the way. Any data on the number of this great question on the number and density of charging points here in Ireland compared to Norway, for example? That is a good point.
In Norway, there's been, as you can imagine, there's much more, but even Ireland, I think there was a report saying, I think every between 3 or 5 kilometers, so something like that, there is a charging point. But again, the problem comes in, if it's a normal charger, normal ESP charger, the wait time to get it to up to 80% of charge is very long, like 3 or 4 hours, or unless it's like a fast charge or Tesla supercharger, it takes a very long time. So
your Kilkenny photograph there, which I thought was a brilliant illustration, like of a real world problem. You got to that charging point with 2 kilometers to spare. How long did you have to charge for then?
Since that was a Tesla supercharger, it took me around 50 minutes to get to 90 minutes. Sorry, 90%. So
50.
Yeah, 50.
That's a long time.
Yeah, so we were lucky where the supercharger was there. There was a coffee shop. We were able to rest.
Okay.
But imagine if it was not a supercharger, it was a normal, typical ESP charger. We have to wait, a couple of hours to get to that point.
That's a lot of coffee.
There's a lot of coffee. So
And Sean Carey on that has a great point. He says he's wondering, is there any, and again, you may or may not know this, any sign of manufacturers developing swappable batteries to swap out at a gas station with a 5-minute turnaround? That's a great point. I do, like, as most people with Canon cameras, like you always bring 2 batteries, because you know, it uses up so much juice when you're video recording, and just pop it out, pop it in. So is that being spoken about?
So you might have heard, like, very back when Tesla was developing Model S or Model X, their first design was to replaceable batteries, but they've been back on that, saying that's not very good design. But you know, one of the vehicles in China has the portable battery design. But nowadays, I think there are startup companies coming up with, you know, if you have any issues on the road, they will charge it there. You know, they will bring it, like a AA company might bring a truck and charge it for you in the middle of the motorway and stuff like that. So there are companies like that, and developing these kind of ideas, but still there's nothing replaceable battery. There's no major company developing those.
Well, there's a gap. Somebody, D McGrath, sorry, I don't know your first name, but he or she says here, there is a Chinese car maker that is proposing to do exactly that. I assume you mean swapping the batteries. I assume that's what it means. So that'll be interesting.
But still, again, saying that logistic nightmare for those companies is really there. You know, can you imagine? You know, the queues of cars there being just to replace the batteries. So that's the logistic nightmare of that is very real. That's one of the reasons I think Tesla went back on their design. Okay,
so it is all about extending the battery life, then, really.
Exactly.
That's where all the money is being put. Paddy Kavanagh, there's an app called PlugShare that is the best list of EV chargers in Ireland with maps. They may have the ability for you to download the data. Now, that's in response to the question about, I think, the number of charge points, you know, compared to Norway, that kind of thing. Ivan Caffrey, do you have any data on the mean distance between electric chargers compared to petrol stations? It seems like this is half the reason of range anxiety. I think we sort of spoke about that. Sean Kerry says, I know in the USA they have developed trialed induction charges in slow lane and in car parking spaces. And Ivan Caffrey is just thanking Paddy Kavanagh there. I'll go with one more question. There's a couple have come in the Q&A. You've hit a nerve here anyway with the presentation, that's for sure, which is great. Dare, D-A-R-E. I don't know if that's your stage name or whatever that is, but Dare anyway. Will apartment living have a huge influence on electric cars, for example, charging? Can you look into the future for us there, Johns? And
exactly, like any new builders building this will have a huge impact. Say in an apartment, you might have a 1 or 2 parking spots. So all those parking spots need to have a like a charging point, like built into it, not built by the customer itself, but all built by the builders. So you know, when they are selling this apartment, they have a much more attractive selling point, saying, okay, we have a charging point as well.
There's a real problem with future proofing here sometimes, isn't there? Like, I don't want to give out, like, because it's a great place to live, really.
Also, imagine, Johnny, saying, you know, if you have an electric car, you can just go into, you can travel anywhere, saying you can just book an Airbnb and think there might be an EV charger. So you have to check the Airbnb with only EV chargers. So there are certain limitations to it.
Yeah, but again, these are all things that people can use as a selling point, and you know, that's it as well. Paul Gleason, I'll come back to your question in a few minutes. We'll keep a couple in reserve for John's at the end of the session, because it is 11:41 now, and I'm conscious of the fact that we also have another speaker to come on board. Johns, that was absolutely fantastic, and I loved it, and I think the bit in Norway about the bus lanes, you know, and EV vehicles using bus lanes. I hope Michael O'Leary is listening in, and he might be able to get rid of his taxi plate and get an EV instead. I'm sure he has them, and that's great. Actually, I have another question for you, but I'm not going to ask it now. I'll go over to Nanette. Johns, thank you very much yet again, and that was absolutely brilliant. Nanette Solan, are you there?
I am, but this is going to be a hard act to follow.
That's great. Okay, so listen, what I'm going to do is I've given you an intro at the top of the event, so I'm going to let you take over now straight away, Nanette, and over to you. I'll go on mute and just give us your screen share there. Yeah, I can see that perfectly, so yes, I can now go on mute. Fantastic. And chat to you afterwards. Great stuff.
Great, thank you very much. So before I kick off, I suppose I wanted to talk about the future of car rental, but at the same time, we've come through such an interesting period for the last 2 years that I decided to step back 2 years and talk a little bit about how we thought about the future at that point. But in addition to that, I'm also touching a little bit on what John's just spoke about with the electric vehicles, because I think there might be a different element in the car rental that you guys have already spoken about quite a bit with Airbnb and range anxiety, but I'll touch on that very briefly. Before I start talking about all of that, I suppose being a B2B brand, car trawler may not be very high on everyone's awareness. So if you have ever rented a car as you were in the process of booking a flight, that was probably us. So what we do is we bring car rental suppliers, Avis, Hertz, Sixt, together with travel companies, whether that's airlines or travel agents, and we produce a product that people can slide into their website, where people can then rent cars. And in addition to that product, we then have our pricing algorithms, our sorting algorithms to get the most optimal experience for the customers. So, as I said, I'll start off talking a little bit about March 2020. We all remember what that felt like and how we looked into the future at that point. And then secondly, the electric vehicles that we already spoke about a little bit. The most important reason why I think that the COVID piece is interesting for car trawler and to other companies, especially those in the travel industry, is all of a sudden everything changed and the future was quite uncertain. We may have hoped at the start that this was going to take 3 months, may end up taking a little bit longer than 3 months, but really a lot of companies were faced with cash flow issues that needed to get addressed, and car trawler was no different. So to start off with, just an overview of what COVID did to our bookings. So what you see here is net bookings. So the bookings that are made minus the cancellations that have come through. And you can see that overnight, I think it was the 20th of February that we started getting hit with cancellations from Italy. All of a sudden, everything started going down. And of course, everyone who cancels is entitled to get their money back. But that has a massive impact on our cash flow. So we needed to know what we could expect. We also needed to get an idea of when we could hope for an improvement in the market. And because we're a global company, we're active in all continents, we also wanted to see whether we might be able to see recovery in certain areas of the world sooner than other areas, and that might actually help us offset some of the risk, which actually ended up being true for us, thankfully. So to get a sense of what the future might hold, we cast a very wide net. We looked at our own behavioral data, the people searching for cars, making bookings, people canceling. We looked at Google search data with regard to people looking for flight information or looking for car rental information. We went to a project by Oxford University where they looked at the level of government restrictions, and we could see restrictions started getting tighter and a little bit later on getting released again. We used data from OpenTable to see how much people were still going out as an indicator of people moving about and people still having confidence in the economy. We used customer and consumer sentiment data from both McKinsey and our own internal work. And we used the Snowflake data market to get access to case rates from the WHO and also Google mobility data. So that is data that your phone sends to Google about whether you're moving around, physically moving around. And the way Google presents this data, it breaks it up in work locations, residential locations, shopping locations, park locations, park and recreation. So we could get a good sense of what people were and weren't doing at the start of COVID. So this gave us a lot of different data points, a lot of different perspectives, and we tried to get to a holistic picture using all of that. So I just want to show you a couple of examples of how we visualize that data for our stakeholders. So first of all, new cases by the WHO. What we've done here is we've color coded the number of cases. Gray is the highest number of new cases. And the darker green it gets, the bigger the difference between the peak and that particular day. So if I just look at the United Kingdom at the bottom, so they had their peak in case rates across the first and second week of April. And then you can see it go from light green to darker green to darker green to very dark green in June. So at that point, the UK was reporting relatively few cases. If you look at just the gray blocks, you can see that Italy was the first to peak, followed by Norway, followed by Spain, which resembles what we remember from those months. The Google mobility data. So what we decided to do was split out residential from everything else. So the idea of a lockdown is you have to stay at home. So we actually saw the mobility or the lack thereof of the residential form of mobility go up. And every other form of mobility go down very, very significantly. And then with time, slowly those lines went back to their starting points. Here you have an overview of the government restrictions. So the darker red, the more stringent the restrictions were. Again, Italy leading the pack. And the way we use this is when a particular country went from a dark shade of red to a lighter shade of red, we took that as an indication of the start of recovery. And very often that did match with other metrics like the Google mobility, like OpenTable and that kind of thing. We looked at how people search, or to what extent people search for flights and for car rental. You can see the second week of March, flights was actually spiking because everyone was trying to get home. But you then see that car rental was recovering sooner than flights was. And this was because people were doing more domestic trips that they did want to rent a car for, whereas flights were still out of the question for quite a long time. Then looking at traffic that actually came to our site. So again, you see that horrible decline in February, March. And as Johnny said, you really don't want to go skiing down that slope because you'll never survive. And then we looked at, well, at what rate do countries come back? So the top bar chart is traffic by residency. So where do our customers live? And the bottom one is by destination. Where do they want to rent a car? So you can see different countries gaining share depending on how quickly their particular country is recovering. Then finally, I just want to talk a little bit about the sentiment piece. So we initially started using the McKinsey consumer sentiment, but we found that was very generic. So people might have pretty decent confidence in the economy, but not be in any way thinking about travel just yet. And maybe they're happy with their country's economy. They're just really afraid about restrictions in other countries, getting stuck in a lockdown, having to quarantine. So we wanted to split out consumer sentiment from car trawler customer sentiment. And for this, we did surveys. We've done 3 waves of that now. And we found that the question, when do you think you might be renting a car again, was actually a very good predictor for people actually renting a car. So in the light blue line, you see indexed survey data from March 2021. When do people expect to rent a car? In the dark blue line, we see also indexed actual bookings over that same period. So you see that the curvature is exactly the same. Of course, numbers are different, but that's all right. But it means that we can use our customer sentiment survey as an indicator of what might be happening in the next 6 or 7 months. We did our last survey in November 21, and what we're seeing for the months ahead is pretty good demand all the way through to September 2022. That's kind of where we stopped asking questions because it's hard for people to plan that far ahead. But what it seems to indicate is that the summer season will be longer. It will start earlier, it will end later, because not everyone wants to go in peak season, July, August, because people don't want to be in long queues in full airports. So people try to go before and after the high season where possible. So what did we learn from this process 2 years ago of having to try and understand what might be happening in car rental for the next 6, 9, 24 months? So the most important thing is, as soon as this started happening, don't dawdle. If you think you need data to help the company understand, don't wait for perfection, just get started. Even if it's 1 or 2 metrics, get going straight away. Second learning is, the more diverse your metrics, the more confidence you can have if they're all pointing the same way. So if we had limited our analysis only in our own queries, bookings, and cancellations, it would have been very hard to see the green shoots before they started hitting us. So government restrictions were actually a very good indicator of what might be happening to our queries and our bookings. The same with those Google searches for car and flights. Third learning was keep adjusting. Every time that you learn something new, every time a new data set becomes available, every time that a data set becomes unavailable, that's fine, take it out, add something else in. Just keep building on it and keep making it more informative as you go. And in our case, because it had to go to a very wide audience, to people, pretty much every division of our company, people who may not necessarily work with Tableau dashboards on a regular basis, the charts had to be very intuitive. And the way we try to do that is, you just work with gray and green. Green is good. You work with gray and red. Red is bad. And just try and work it that way. And while all of this helps people understand what the future might look like, there's absolutely no sense in pretending that you have any certainty. Like in our last survey that we did in November 2021, we did five subsequent waves, 5 subsequent weeks where we sent out invites to take part. After the 4th round of invites, the news broke of Omicron. And guess what? The responses to our 5th wave were very different from waves 1, 2, 3, 4. So you can't predict the future. You can only hope that you can understand it better and react to it more quickly. So that's the first part I wanted to take you through. The second part then is the electric vehicles. So John's has already touched on quite a few of the topics that I want to talk about a little bit. But I think there's an interesting piece around car rental and electric vehicles, because it's not your vehicle. You're not accustomed to it. You might be driving to Kilkenny and all of a sudden realize that the car isn't responding the way you had intended. And we as a car rental industry need to be thinking about that and need to account for some of those issues. But the first question really is, like John's already mentioned it, new car sales share in Norway is very high. It's interesting, the numbers are slightly different. John's and I must be using different data sources, but indicatively they're the same. So if there are certain countries where it's already 50% of new cars that are being bought are electric vehicles, is this just inevitable? Is it just going to happen? We only need to decide when. And also 3 months ago in November, Hertz placed an order of 100,000 Teslas. Now, Hertz is a huge player in the car rental market. Is this the first of many? Or will Hertz be an outlier in this? And are they not going to be followed by their competitors? We don't know. But it does raise a very interesting question of what will the next 24 months look like? Because Hertz ordering 100,000 Teslas could have a massive impact on the industry. However, there are a couple of problems here. So range anxiety. John's already mentioned it. If you don't know where the next charge point is, and you can't just plug in your car overnight at your Airbnb because your Airbnb doesn't have a charge point, this becomes problematic. Same with the speed of charging. If you can't charge your car overnight, you don't want to be sitting at a petrol station with your kids in the back seat, watching your holiday pass by because your car has to charge for 3 hours. And the third piece that I think is an additional worry in the car rent industry is the connection type. We all remember the time that every mobile phone had a different charger, and you couldn't borrow your friend's chargers because they had a different phone. It's the same thing with electric vehicles. So many of them have different chargers. Are you certain that your car rental supplier has given you all the adapters that you need? And to give you an example of that, in 2019, I went on a lovely ski holiday in Austria. We rented a car, and as we got to the ski resort itself, we just had to put the snow chains on for the last 500 meters. And we had booked a car with snow chains, and there was a box of snow chains in the boot. Problem was, the snow chains were two different sizes. One fitted, the other one was too small. You're not going, well, we did manage to get to the house on a single snow chain, but it's not necessarily advisable. What happens if you rent an electric vehicle and you don't get the right adapter? You're only going to find that out when you're halfway down the road to Kilkenny with 2 kilometers left on your range. That is not the right moment to find out you don't have the right adapter. So there is a lot of problems here if it is not your car that you park at your house that you charge overnight. And I think we have to be honest about that in the car rental industry, that we don't really have a solution for these very practical, as well as the emotional, the range anxiety, very practical and emotional problems here. Now, e-bikes. I don't know whether there are many Dutch people on the call, but Dutch bike shops have a very interesting strategy of creating demand for e-bikes. So the Dutch love their bikes, and there is a decent cohort of the population that at the start of each winter will take their bike into the bike shop for what they call a winter service. So they check your brakes, they oil everything, they grease everything, so that everything will be perfect for the winter time. And when you drop your bike in, it will be gone for about a day. You can pick it up the next day. The guy who runs the shop says, oh, here, you can borrow a bike from me. I don't have any normal bikes, but borrow this e-bike for the day and you can drop it back tomorrow. 24 hours later, this person comes back. Oh my God, absolutely love the e-bike. Isn't it fantastic? Yes, I'll pick up my old bike, but I'll also come back next month and buy the e-bike. So the bicycle shop is creating its own demand, which is a very, very smart tactic. Lots of problems with e-bikes and accidents that we can talk about for a very long time. But the point is, people are creating demand for e-bikes by giving people an opportunity to experience an e-bike. Can we do something similar with electric vehicles? Would that possibly work? And a couple of months ago, Volkswagen has decided to buy Europcar. So now we have a car manufacturer owning a car rental company. They haven't done this in order to create a market for electric vehicles. In fact, Volkswagen has been very clear that they want to do this because they want to get stronger in ride shares and car subscriptions, which ultimately is very, very close to car rental. But there is no reason why they can't actually use the same partnership to understand people's reactions to electric vehicles, test out different things, and possibly cultivate demand. But whether Volkswagen decides to go that way, of course, only time will tell. Finally, I want to show you a quick test that we did on our own platform. You may not be familiar with our websites. Usually what this website looks like is you have your search parameters here in the left corner. You have filters along the left. You have a carousel for car sizes around the top. And then here you have a long list of vehicles that you can rent. Most of the options do not come with this bright blue box that make it stand out. But the test was to actually add this box around one of the options, which is an eco-friendly vehicle. Could be electric, could be hybrid. We applied it to both. So we gave it a visual treatment, and we also put it at the top as the first result. And we tested this out in 4 countries in Scandinavia, as well as in the Netherlands and France. What we saw is that in Scandinavia, the share of eco-friendly vehicles that were being rented nearly increased by 50%. So it went from 7 to 11% of all the cars booked were eco-friendly vehicles. In the Netherlands and France, there was no change. The visual treatment and putting it at the top of the sort order had no effect. The only effect it did have in both regions actually is that the eco-friendly vehicles tend to be a little bit more expensive, which means that the first car you see has a higher price tag, and that has an impact on conversion. So people might say, oh, that's too much money, and they leave the site. So we still need to fix for that and need to understand how we can actually promote eco-friendly vehicles and at the same time not scare people off with an expensive car at the very top if that's outside of their budget. So we're testing this in an iterative fashion, and we'll continue to test that throughout 2022. But what it does show is that where there is infrastructure, where people know that a hybrid or an electric vehicle will perform well because you can charge it wherever you want, like in Scandinavia, we can actually improve the share of eco-friendly vehicles in our sales. So expectations from Petrol about electric vehicles and hybrids. We expect it to progress very differently from country to country. So this is both the source country and the destination country. You can expect that, for example, Norwegians aren't afraid to rent an electric vehicle because they know what to expect. You can also expect that if people go on holidays to Norway and they know it has a lot of charge points, that people will be quicker to rent an electric vehicle. Different speed by supplier. So you already saw Hertz has bought 100,000 Teslas. Of course, that will allow Hertz to rent out more electric vehicles than their competitors who don't own as many. And really those two put together means that the rental car industry can't really lead. We have to follow because the infrastructure is required before it makes sense to start renting out a lot of electric vehicles. The appetite is there where the infrastructure is in place. So very similar to what John's already said about the difference between the Norway experience and the Ireland experience. It is the government that needs to promote the usage and the ownership of and the rental of electric vehicles. Final slide then, just some final thoughts. So with regards COVID and trying to see into the future, we found that behavioral, attitudinal data, as well as third-party data put together were extremely powerful. It gave us a lot more confidence. It allowed us to make better decisions and lead to better outcomes. And I am very proud to say that, yes, Petrol's cash flow was affected quite heavily by COVID. But we didn't have to let anyone go. We managed to get through it as a company very well. And I think a lot of that is caused by the fact that we could give our decision makers the confidence that recovery started happening almost immediately after the crash. And we just needed to look in the right places and leverage the US when we could, leverage Asia when we could, etc., move things around. Tableau was particularly useful here because just clear visualizations. You don't need to be extremely data literate to understand your Tableau charts. Everything was accessible in one place, and we use these charts both internally and externally. So we made this available to our partners, to our suppliers, to say, this is what we see happening. You should see similar effects in your own the sale flights, for example. And then finally, in terms of environmental impact of car rental, like it almost feels like a contradiction in terms to say car rental needs to be greener, but it doesn't need to be. So we've started testing how we can contribute, and for 2022 we have quite a few ideas up our sleeves about how we can help both our partners and our suppliers to mitigate some of their environmental impact. So if that's something that interests you, I can't say too much about it because they're still secrets, but there will be a lot of press coverage on LinkedIn in the months to come. So please watch this space. So Johnny, I'll hand over back to you.
Absolutely fabulous presentation, and there's so much that just from a presenter's point of view that I'm going to rob off you from that in terms of even taking references from John's presentation and going back to Kilkenny and all of that kind of stuff. I thought, stroke of genius, Nanette, absolutely fantastic. So lovely presentation. I have one question for you, Tableau based, and because I was really impressed with those color charts, right? Because it was as if you were countering the waves with waves of your own, right? And you could see where Italy was at the beginning and coming out of it, and then other countries were going into it and then coming out of it. And I kind of have two questions on that. How the first one, and you touched on it at the end, how much did that reassure your stakeholders? First, that's the first one. And the other one is a more practical one. How many different charts did you go through before you decided to go with that that chart?
I'll take the second one first. Probably two versions.
Okay.
Version one was a line chart that made my head hurt and was discounted very, very quickly.
Good.
Then chart two was pretty much this. And the way I often tend to work this is I start with a piece of paper and a pen and say, this is what I, as a consumer of data, would want it to look like. Yeah. Now figure out a way to make Tableau do this.
Yeah.
And what we had to do for this was actually create a table based on the original data. So take the raw data, add calculations on top that calculate, well, what's the lowest point from the start of the date range to now, and then what is the percentage difference from now to whatever is that lowest point, and then drop that into Tableau. So it didn't take us long to get to this design, but we did have to build data upon data to make this work. In terms of the confidence it gave our colleagues, significant confidence. Like we all knew, as I said, the 20th of February, I won't forget it. All of a sudden there was this panic of how deeper is this gap going to go? Like we see the line go down, where will it stop? And having the visibility saying, okay, yes, this is Italy, but the UK hasn't gone yet. And we do a lot of business in the UK. And then when we saw the UK go a couple of weeks later, at that point, Italy had stopped crashing, Spain had stopped crashing. So we knew that we weren't going to get hit from each country to the same extent all at the same time.
Yeah.
The US didn't get affected until much later. We do a lot of business there. So we could mitigate the issues in one country with the successes in another country. And having that visible overview that people can see, actually, okay, this is, yes, it's bad here, but no, it's not bad here, was hugely helpful.
Without being too, dramatic about it or poetic about it, you were actually kind of visualizing hope there a little bit.
I might put that on my CV. I'm visualizing hope.
Great. Okay. Look, I'm going to go to the chat, and I'm just going to see Patrick Kavanagh. Another great presentation. Thank you. Great insights. PM. This is from, sorry, Porrick McDonagh. I don't know if it's we'll have a look anyway. A friend bought a 5-year-old Leaf for the daily commute with the plan to rent a car for the weekend whenever he wanted to drive down the country. Are there any plans for car rental companies to give a special offering to EV owners for weekend rentals? I don't know if there was, but there might be now.
I don't know. I suppose Carswaller isn't a car rental supplier as such. We partner with car rental suppliers, but what I do think is quite an interesting development there that could actually solve that problem is car subscriptions. So there are a lot of car manufacturers that now allow you to subscribe to cars, but you don't have to take the same car out every day. So you could say, I subscribe to Audi, and on Monday to Friday, I use an Audi A3. But at the weekend, when I have 3 kids in the back and a dog and two bicycles, I rent an Audi A6. So it's still your own subscription. And then the amount you pay depends on how much flexibility you want. So this is a fairly new thing in the car rental industry. I think it's really only in place the last 18 months, maybe 24 months. Some companies are better at it than others. Some give you a lot more flexibility than others. Some of the price plans are pretty prohibitive, other price bands aren't. But I think this could definitely be developed into giving people more flexibility about when is an electric vehicle suitable and when isn't.
Cool. Okay. There was one other thing about the rental side of it. How much, and again, you may not be able to answer this question just in terms of what your strategy is, right? But how much, I wouldn't say hope, but how much expectation is there that EVs and the market for renting of EVs is going to become a kind of a status symbol, right? Do you know what I mean? So that, like, if I'm going to Norway, I want the Norwegian experience, right? And are you going to market that as part of the Norwegian experience? You know, why not drive like the Norwegians and rent an electronic vehicle? You know, electric vehicle. You know.
Yeah, I think in countries where the infrastructure is in place,
yeah,
I think this could be like an added bonus of the experience. But where the infrastructure isn't in place, there is very little room to play. So I was away for a weekend 2 weekends ago, and the hotel I was staying at, you drive into the car park, and as you arrive, there's this beautiful set of Tesla charging points. And I said to myself, like, well, what if you don't have Tesla?
Yeah,
you have to go to the back of the hotel. And there's this little dingy place where the bushes are overgrown, where the other charging points are. It's like, if the infrastructure isn't there, it's very hard to make electric vehicles appealing, especially if you're not accustomed to it. You don't want to go on holidays and then be stressed out. That's the worst thing you can do on a holiday.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And then you have people who are very fickle, you know, by nature, and they might come to the destination feeling, oh, well, this is great and it'll be looked after for me anyway. But, you know, for certain parts of the world, you know, they have different expectations around service and that kind of thing. I suppose that's an aspect of it as well. I'm going to just go, Keith Drummond, who's a regular, has just gone into the chat there. Great presentations. Thank you very much for these. And they were, both of them, absolutely fantastic. I'm going to go back to one question that we didn't answer for you, Johns, if that's okay. Paul Gleason has asked the question here. Nanette, you can jump in on this as well if you have an opinion, obviously. Why do you think the Irish government haven't applied a similar model as the Norwegians to encourage EV sales? Oof.
So, in my personal opinion, you know, it's all about the, you know, money matters. The financial burden the government has to, you know, we don't have a Norwegian fund like the oil wells like the Norway has. But again, that being said, you know, when the climate impact, what they say is going to happen, if we don't do is there, we should certainly do it. When the COVID happened, we didn't have the money, but we still pulled off of these financial, you know, we had to borrow money, we had to do a couple of other things, we had to cut back on things, you know, certain things has to be done in the same thing. I think I kind of feel, you know, the climate change is kind of the same effect or worse when it comes to, you know, the future generations. So we had to do more in terms of, you know, rather than looking into the money point of view.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
I agree with Johns. I think money is the biggest consideration. Both the cost of incentivizing and also the reduction in road tax. Because if people don't have to pay road tax, then how are we going to pay for the rest of the country? I was reading an interesting article about the load that electric vehicles would put on the ESB network. So that there is, since the 1970s, different countries have realized that we are becoming more and more dependent on electricity. Therefore, the electric network needs to be upgraded. Not every country started that early enough, Ireland unfortunately being one of them. So similarly, in the way that if you have solar panels on your house, you can't necessarily provide that stream back to the ESB because the network can't handle it. Similarly, if every person would buy an electric vehicle and have an electric charge point outside their house, the ESB isn't going to be able to cope. So I think there's definite financial problems for the government, but also practical complications that ultimately the government kind of needs to hold back a bit because we can't put our entire electric network at risk.
Okay, I'm curious to know actually, and again, I know very little about EVs. I might make this the last question unless other people come in, but what's the story with trucks and vans as electric vehicles? You know, because I imagine like they're just ridiculously difficult to power. And so does anybody know anything about that? Because I mean, there's obviously a commercial, you know, side to this as well. What's happening in that space? Do you know?
So there are a couple of startups, mainly in US and Germany, I have heard, you know, coming up with the trucks for the EVs. But again, that means that, you know, it's a very not an easy process. Even to release a hatchback is a nightmare in terms of supply chain and building a factory and everything. So building a truck that has to carry all the load is a completely another game. So, you know, you might have heard of Tesla released a semi truck a couple of years back, but they still haven't even produced it in a mass market. So that's, I think it will be, you know, by 2024 or 2025, we start seeing EV trucks.
Okay. God, that'll be interesting. Okay, I've got one in here from Porrick McDonough, who says on Post have a fleet of EV vans. Yeah, I can't remember seeing any, but yeah, absolutely, I'm sure they do.
Oh, I heard something like that in the article on Irish Times or something.
Yeah, great. Okay, well, fair play to them. Great stuff. Okay, guys, if there's no more questions or anything from the chat, I think we will leave it at that. We're pretty much bang on time. Sean Carey's jumped in there in Germany. In Germany for trucks, HGV long distance piloting / developing overhead wires for highway and then diesel petrol off highway. So they're making some progress in Germany by the looks of it, which you were alluding to there, I think. So look, brilliant. We're kind of bang on time. 12:15, 12:30 is what we aim to finish at. And look, I really just want to take the opportunity to say they were fantastic presentations. I learned a hell of a lot, and it's fascinating. It's a fascinating area that really affects us all, and it's interesting to see how different branches of you know, the industry is dealing with it. And I've got about 3 pages of notes written down here and questions. I didn't get to them all, but absolutely fantastic. So look, there will be a recording which we'll put up a link to, at least on our LinkedIn page, the Information Lab Ireland, and there'll probably be a few screen grabs and photos and various different things like that we'll put up on the LinkedIn page as well. But if that's it from everybody, I will say thank you very much to Nanette Solan from Car Trawler, and a sincere thanks to you, and a sincere thanks to Johns George from Bank of Ireland. And we look forward to seeing everybody again, hopefully in about 2 or 3 months. It might be face-to-face, it might not be. If you want to keep an eye out on these things, as I said, join us on LinkedIn, and we'll always keep you up to date. And that is it. I will be the last to leave. So we're getting lots of thanks from everybody. Amanda Lynch, thanks, very enjoyable and great presentations. If you have any questions, or if your company or you wants to present, get in touch with me, johnny.butler@theinformationlab.ie, and we'd be happy to listen to what your proposals are, what you have to say. Guys, that was fantastic. Thank you very much.
Cheers, everyone.
We'll
Bye.
see you. I'll wait until everybody's gone, so we'll do a virtual exit again, a virtual ushering. So thank you very much, guys. All the best.